Folks, Pastor Bill here. I've been really quiet, haven't posted anything on Facebook for quite a while, video or otherwise, but I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit about my soon and our pending divorce. Now, I know there are a lot of you who think that that is not an appropriate topic for social media, and for the most part, I agree. However, some things have changed, and I'll tell you what those are. Two things in particular. One, it's come to my attention that Debra, my soon-to-be ex-wife, is that she's currently staying in a homeless shelter and going meetings of homeless or abused women, and she has been speaking uh, to groups, and at least one group has come to my attention where she claimed to have recently left an 18-year abusive marriage, and she's trying to present herself as somehow a victim of some circumstance or mistreatment that simply isn't true. It just simply isn't true. In fact, when I commented before, it was because she had put a post on Facebook claiming that she was staying in a homeless shelter and it was eating at soup kitchens and such and near destitute. I mentioned in that there was no reason for her to be in a homeless shelter. One, she didn't have to leave; it was her choice. Two, there were more than enough places to stay. What I didn't mention was the details, and that she had enough resources. I didn't elaborate. The truth is, she was staying in Pittsburgh after she left me, and she stayed there until the day she got the divorce papers, and then she went immediately to the homeless shelter to try to generate sympathy for herself. $1,000 in liquid assets available to her on the day that she left, and on this day. She regularly goes back to the Marriott Hotel to stay there. She won't stay in any hotel under the Marriott. She claims that that's the lowest standard someone like her could accept. And so when she travels, she stays at the Marriott. She, for instance, spent Mother's Day weekend at the Marriott Hotel in Pittsburgh before going back to the homeless shelter. And she spent Memorial Day weekend there at the Marriott in Pittsburgh again, visiting. Be too inconvenient, although there are a number of houses in the area. But as long as we were married, she regularly traveled back and forth and established the habit of staying at the Marriott, usually on my dime. And now she still does that. She's far, far, far from penniless. But anyway, the thing that's come to my attention recently, there were some issues with my health. I had COVID last month, and I was sick for several weeks. And they did some chest X-rays and CAT scans, and they've told me that I had a tumor somewhere around the size of a tennis ball, 8.5 or so centimeters in diameter. This tumor is supposed to be that they believe is cancerous, and that may affect the amount of time I have left. In the past, when people have criticized me and lied about me and distorted the truth, I've generally been pretty silent, knowing that over time, the conduct of my life, the character of my life will be my vindication and truth. There are a lot of people that none of them can prove them untrue, uh, or unfaithful, or unscriptural in my belief. I'd be glad to debate that with anyone. Now, I may not have as much time as I thought I would for time to prove who's telling the truth and who's not. It seems that if my time is cut short, all of the assets that I've worked for, in spite of having signed a prenuptial agreement, not only is she trying to take through her attorneys and various legal maneuvers on me, but now she wants to destroy the very legacy that I have lived for these last 25 years as a Christian. The legacy of the ministry and the work for Christ that I've done, the character, the love, the sharing, kindness, the peace. I don't think that the Lord would have me stay silent through that. So I intend to speak. I intend to speak a lot. I'll be doing several videos like this one, where we can just tell the stories, just tell the truth. If Deborah wants to talk about an 18-year abusive marriage, I'll be glad to talk about it. I can say a couple of things on the subject. First, I can say that in the 25 years that I've been a Christian, since 1996, since years before I knew Deborah, I haven't had a single occasion where I need or taken the action of lifting a finger to harm anyone. I couldn't imagine I can't imagine a situation where I might want or need to strike another person. Now, quite the opposite. We planted a ministry in the middle of one of the worst neighborhoods in Springfield. When we opened the ministry there on Wittenberg and Pleasant, there were regularly prostitutes and on the property, right on the corners. And I would go out daily and confront them with my Bible in my hand. Those of you that were around there know that this is true. Never once of violence, but with my Bible in my hand and with the love of Jesus in my heart. Oh, those were wonderful times. During that time, I was cussed out and threatened with guns. My very life was threatened more than once. And in the years that followed, working in this ministry with hundreds, literally hundreds of teens in the community, sometimes becoming violent. Some of them were gang members. How many fights we've had to try to prevent or break up, and how many angry people all over the years. During that time, I've had knives threatened, pulled, and guns pulled, and I've been punched in the face. I've been spit on. I've been cussed at. I've been called every imaginable name. I've been slandered. I've been threatened in a single time, not a single time, when I raised a hand to strike another human being, much less a woman. Those of you who know me know very well how many times you've seen me, enter into a confrontation, a conflict, and never someone else. So as far as abuse, it just simply didn't happen, at least not in any context, any normal context of the word. Now, I'm sure that if you pressed her, what she means by it is that she felt emotionally troubled or somehow verbally abused. She once said that I was abusive because I used the word bitch in reference to her. I'd like to tell you that I didn't do that, but I did. I know that there are many words as a pastor and as a Christian that I should have chosen instead, and I regret the use of the word, and I can honestly must admit that I used the word more than once. In my defense, as I pointed out to her, the word is a word in the English language. It is in the Webster's Dictionary. And if you'll look up at the definition, it certainly seemed to adequately express what I was experiencing at the time and the behavior that I believed I was witnessing. However, I do regret the use of the word. That's the closest thing that she could ever claim to abuse that came from me. However, if I could speak to Debra right now, and she wanted to talk about abuse, I would say, you were in an abusive marriage for 18 years, Debra, but you were the abuser. And anyone who was close enough to know knows that this is true. You were the abuser, and I was often the defender of those that you abused. I was often the intermediary. I was the buffer. I was the whatever it had to be to try to bring peace. I was the peacemaker, the peace lover, the person trying to bring you back from the radical abuse that you intended to inflict on almost everyone we ever took into our home. When you married me, you knew that we were taking people into our home and that God had called me to this. I took in kids and adults long before I knew you. I founded this ministry and incorporated it years before I met you. There was never any question. There was never any possibility that we intended to stop being Christians, to stop doing the things that God called us to. And when you threatened me, I told you not to marry me. So, abuse. Well, let's talk about abuse. Right after we got married, we were on a boat up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, a ferry boat going across through the locks from one lake to another. There was a boy named Charles who was 15. Charles' mother had been in prison for 8 years of his life. His brother, an older brother, was in prison for murder. He had a father that was estranged from him, had nothing to do with him. He'd been raised by an absolutely abusive aunt. And Charles' life, frankly, was a mess. He had anger issues, emotional issues, and but Charles had been drawn to us through the ministry, through the youth ministry, and I had been a father to him. He loved us and asked if he could come and live with us, and he did. And so when we were on this boat, Debra and I sitting on a bench, enjoying a beautiful afternoon, Charles rushed over and sat down between us and threw one arm around Deborah and one arm around me, and smiling as big as boy could, said, "Hello, Mom. Hello, Dad." And in that moment, I was as happy and as pleased as I could be. It was like a dream come true, to be honest. It was a family, a mother, a father, a wife, a son. It was making a difference in someone's life that wasn't being done by way. The joy of Christianity and of love. I was so pleased, and watching that boy's heart burst with joy. Unfortunately, it only lasted for half a second. He could no longer finish the sentence, and I could no longer respond before Deborah shoved him off of that bench and began to shout at him with an angry face, saying, "Don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever try to come between a husband and his wife. You just tried to separate William and me, or allow that." And as she began shouting at him, I said, "Deborah, he didn't do anything wrong." That was abusive. That was absolutely abusive, Deborah. It was horrible, absolutely horrible. It was despicable. Had I known that you were that kind of a woman, I would never have married you, even considered it. What you did was to scar his heart in a way that could never be repaired. Suffering such rejection, we were trusted with that boy's life. We were trusted to help him. Fish. That's abuse. In that case, it was absolute abuse. When Spencer Mitchell needed to spend the night at our house because his father had thrown him out on the street, and we were operating a youth home. The house was owned by the ministry. We had 6 empty beds in the house, and we were house parents there. He came needing help, and I let him sleep in the middle bedroom. And when I went to bed and let you know that he was sleeping, and you demanded dinner instead of a bed, because you had already made that bed and had it looking the way you wanted it. Why did he have to sleep on a bed? And when I tried to, beds were there for that purpose. And if you didn't want to make them, I'd find somebody else to make them. You didn't have to. I never required you to do anything. Never complained about a meal you cooked or any. You fully know it. There was never a time when I criticized your housekeeping, your laundry, whether you did it or whether you didn't, your anything else that you did in the house. I loved you, and I supported you, and I encouraged you. But anyway, when Spencer was sleeping in that bed, and you tried to wake him up, you wanted me to allow you to wake that boy up and make him sleep on the floor so you wouldn't have to make the bed. That was abuse, Deborah. That was abuse. And you continued to shout and scream and holler about it. And when I wouldn't let you called me every insult you could imagine, that I didn't love you and I didn't know how to treat women, and no other man would be like that. And until 4:30 in the morning, and I could only stop it by actually calling your parents and waking them up in bed and having your dad talk some sense to you. God is my witness, and so is your father in this one, because you did do that, and that was abusive. When Tashim came to stay with us, a 16-year-old boy who had been abused and mistreated and rejected, and we were house parents then, and he was staying in our group home. We were charged not only by God but by the court with taking care of him. We were the only people on staff. And this boy, by the way, this boy had just received Christ as his Savior. I led him to Jesus and the gospel, and he was so excited about his salvation. He kept reading the Bible and wanting to share it with others. He wanted to share his faith. He was glad to be a Christian. And he would ride with us to Panera Bread and with his Bible open. And when he tried, and by the way, there is nothing more important that we had to do. That is what we were called to do. That's why I married you, a mother to our children, that you would be a helpmate to me, a partner in the ministry, and yes, also a life companion. And when the boy asked questions about the Bible, the adults were sitting up front. We didn't have anything important to talk about. There was nothing pressing. It wasn't an emergency, but you didn't want to hear him. You wanted that time for when we were on staff and on call, and it was our responsibility to take care of him. You so abused him, and by the way, that was abuse, Deborah. That was abusive. Words and your insults that I had to intervene and say, hey, let him alone. It's okay. He's a person too. And then you became so angry you refused to ride with us anymore, making him your enemy in our house. You did everything you could to provoke that boy, to provoke him and to escalate him time and time again because you knew he had an anger problem. You wrote things in your journal about addressing, but as your enemy. My enemy is living in the house with me. You think I didn't see that journal, but I did and have copies. How many times you wrote those sick things? That was abuse, Deborah. Christian and a house parent charged with the responsibility of taking care of these kids, and instead you refer to them as your enemy. Your enemy. You want to talk about this marriage? When another boy recently came to stay with us who had suffered so much trauma, it's unimaginable. This boy had seen his own brother's brains blown out and shot by a drive-by shooting at a public park and died in his arms. And another one of his best friends had died by a shooting in front of him. This boy came to live with us after suffering so much, but he trusted us. He trusted me through the relationship that we established through the ministry. And the first time that he didn't empty the dishwasher, right? Instead of just encouraging him and saying, hey, bud, make sure you get that tonight, like I would have done. That what you called weak in me. By the way, the kids are they're still getting dishes emptied. They may not do it every single morning, but it's still getting emptied. But anyway, instead of doing that, you began to berate him, saying, we took you into our home. How many times has someone heard you say that? When I say things like that, recounting the story to others, as soon as I say those words, they begin to shake their head and nod because they've heard you say it. Took you into our home. We treated you so good. We allow you to eat our food. We allow you to enjoy our home, this beautiful home that we've provided. We took you in when no one else would. When no one else would take you in, we did. When no one else would feed you, your own family wouldn't take care of you. We took care of you and we fed you when you were on the street. That was abuse. Because the kid didn't open the dishwasher right, you abused and emotionally scarred and attacked. And anyone with any knowledge knows that that's abuse. I spent thousands of dollars sending you and the rest of our staff to classes, to training, to therapeutic crisis intervention training and other trainings to learn how to treat people right. These were men and women in crisis situations. They didn't need to be abused. They didn't need to be mentally and verbally abused by some selfish, self-centered woman who only cared about herself and had to be exalted. No, that was abuse, Deborah. When we got married and had 100 towels, literally 100 towels given to us for wedding gifts. So many people, listen, folks, if you're buying gifts for someone at a wedding, get something else. Just send a card. Well, anyway, we had 15 kids on an outing, and we were sending them to the rec center to swim pool, and I let them get in the van with towels so that they could shower and clean up and all of that. And you flipped your lid and insisted that all those kids bring the towels back inside because those were yours. No one could use them but you and me. And when I disagreed, I said, my God, we've got 100 towels. You threw the towels in my face, and then you followed them up with your claws, and I had claw marks on my neck and on my face for almost 2 weeks after that. That was abuse. You don't have any similar stories you could tell of me doing things like that, because I didn't and wouldn't. No. And we could go on. When God spoke to me to tell me to bring in Cordell, that he had to live with us, this kid would have been a disaster if not for us taking him in. You spent 3 weeks not speaking to me, giving me the cold shoulder, threatening to divorce me every day, saying you were finished with me. 3 weeks it took me to convince you to listen to the Spirit of God and continue the commitment that we committed to before we even got married, and that I had committed to with my life. And we did take him in, and we did make that difference, and it would have been disastrous otherwise. And then after he was living there for a while, when he was driving, so you were driving somewhere with him, and the boy wouldn't kiss your ring, so to speak, when he wouldn't respond to your berating, as he just shut down as you berated him, you knocked him, and you knocked the Kool-Aid out of his hand. He had a cup of Kool-Aid, and you knocked it out of his hand as he was taking a drink. He had it just to his mouth, and you knocked it out of his hand so that you could splash the Kool-Aid all over his body. And then he threw a little bit of it back to you. But that was abuse, Deborah. You came back to the house screaming and hollering that you wanted that bastard out of your house this day because he threw some Kool-Aid back on you after you did that to him. That was abuse, Deborah. That was abusive. My God. And then when I wouldn't allow you to throw him out on the street, you left. You left for 2 days. You left. You called me less than a man. I wasn't a real man or a real husband because I would never allow someone to do that to my wife. Well, I'll tell you what, a real man would not allow his wife to do that to others without saying, this is wrong. And I didn't. I never, ever backed down to that abuse. I never agreed with it. When Mr. Bobby, who worked for us in the group home, refused to sign a medicine log because he hadn't actually witnessed the medicine being taken, and you threatened his job, it would have been a violation of law for him to do that. He could have gone to jail if he got caught. Not that he would have gotten caught. But you insisted that he sign the log anyway, and when he refused, you began to tell him that you were his employer and you would fire him if he didn't. And when I intervened and told him he was okay, we would just do an incident report. That's all we had to do was an incident report. And then you wouldn't speak to me for 3 weeks, threatening to divorce me again and saying that I wasn't a real man because no real man would let someone disrespect their wife the way he disrespected you. This was a freaking state licensed group home. There were laws to follow. I respected God. But Deborah, that was abusive. It wasn't abusive of me to defend the truth. It was abusive of you to be so selfish and so evil. When a guy named Mike was at the homeless shelter recently, and you demanded that he pay homage to you, that he kiss your ring, so to speak, as you went back and tried to strike a conversation with him while he was doing his laundry, and he said, I don't want to talk. I don't want to talk. Someone in his family had gotten killed that day. He had drug issues. He was homeless, for crying out loud, 45 years old and a mess of a life, but you insisted. You insisted that he stop. You began to say, Mike, that's not appropriate. It's not appropriate when people are speaking to you. You must speak back. Now, I'm trying to talk to you right now, and you began to harass the man, following him from room to room in the homeless center. He tried to go back to his bed, to the sleeping area, and you followed him back there, demanding that he speak until the man finally began cursing and saying, get the F out of my face. I don't want to talk to you. And then you conspired to have him thrown out of the center. That was abusive. That was horribly abusive. May God have mercy on your soul. I don't know how someone like you could even think that you will one day stand before a holy God and not be judged for these things. Abusive? Folks, I've gone on and on and on, and I've only just begun to touch the surface of the stories that I can tell that are just like this, and some far, far worse. Far worse. Every time you called those boys, those boys that lived in our home, over 40 of them we've taken in over the years, and people say how wonderful we are, but they don't know the truth. They don't know who you are. Every time you called them bastards and said you want those bastards out of your home, and when someone would move, when Dale moved out and you said, I'm so glad that bastard's out of my home, he should have been out a long time ago. That was abusive, Deborah. Abuse. Yeah, we did have an 18-year abusive marriage, and you were certainly the abuser. I can honestly say, and you know, and if you'll admit it, that it's true, I woke up every morning with kind words, words of goodness, words of kindness. The first time my eyes saw you every day, I said something kind. No matter what happened the day before, no matter how bad the argument was, whether you believed it was your fault, my fault, or nobody's fault, every morning I woke up with kind words. In 18 years, you never paid a single necessity of life. You never paid for a single house payment or car payment. You never paid for an electric bill or a gas bill. Show the canceled check if you can. I've got every one. Every one. There was never a time when you paid for a household repair, a water bill, a utility of any kind, car insurance, house insurance. You never paid for any of that. You never, I paid for all of your cars, and I made sure you wrecked a car one night and I bought another one at an auction the next day. I never left you without. Everything you asked me for, we never had a single argument over money in 18 years because I provided everything you needed and you did whatever you wanted with your money. You had a job for years making $50,000 a year and you spent every penny the way you wanted it. That was abuse, Deborah. That was abuse, that you could abuse that situation and slander my good name now. Because You want it all. You always wanted it all, and you still want it all. That was abuse, my friends. No, I did. I woke up every morning with good words. Every time you threatened to divorce me, I pleaded with you not to. I pleaded with you to stay. I reminded you of the good that God had done, of the wonders of his love and the joy of our salvation, and how good it was to give, how much better it is to give than to receive. You walked around acting like that we were some kind of destitute people that had given everything we had and had nothing left, while we were living high on the hog, eating anything we want. There was never a restaurant you wanted to eat at that I said we couldn't afford. There was never a meal we couldn't pay for. There was never anything. We lived in a 4,000 square foot house with so much room. You could get lost in it. My goodness, you didn't want for anything. When you wanted $300 for a wig, I gladly gave it. And then when you didn't like that, and you wanted another one and another one, I bought it. I think I bought 4 or 5 wigs just within the last year and a half alone. Every time you asked for another $100 for hair so you could go get your hair done in Pittsburgh, there was never a time when I said anything that even resembled a complaint. If you asked for $100, I gave you $200. If you asked for 2, I gave you more. Every time you needed money for the hotels that you were staying at, the only answer I ever gave you was yes. Yes and yes, no matter what I was facing in our own financial struggles, that my own financial struggles that you knew nothing of, had no part in. I provided well for you, Deborah. I treated you well. Abusive was abusive, but you were the abuser. And God is my witness. The Lord Jesus Christ knows that I do not lie. I may not have time. I may not have money. I may be near the end. I may be seeing Jesus sooner than any of us. But if I do, I can stand before him knowing that every word I've said here is true, and I'm ready to give an account. Well, God bless you. Thank you, folks, for listening. Look, it may sound like I'm mad or angry. I'm not. In my body, I mean no ill will toward her. It's impossible for me to recount some of these things without feeling some emotion. I was angry about them, and if something was happening today, there is a righteous indignation. There is a time when we should get angry. But I've never carried anger into the next day, and I don't now. I'm not angry. I'm simply responding. I'm responding to some words that she said, and I'm bringing the truth to light. I may have very little time left to do that, and I believe, as God is my witness, that it's the right thing to do. So I'm going to continue to do it. If you're offended by it, just please click the thing off. That mouse button you got there on your computer, it runs all over the screen, and there's a place where there's an X there. There's an X there in the window you're watching right now. If this offends you, there's a little X there. If you'll just click that X, you won't have to hear anymore. Okay, God bless you, folks. Have a great night. Bye-bye.